Thank you for your
Thank you.
solicit answer. And let me just say that's kind of a duplication of a comment that I was going to read next. And so let me just read this one before I respond. It says, "It is tempting to say, just get it over and done with, but indeed there is no over and done with. This is like the camel getting its nose into the tent. We were warned about that centuries ago." So the question is whether this is the front runner of more to come, and what would be the limits of this proposal?
As I said at the start, we have been working with ITD on moving over legal loads through Idaho. There was never a guarantee, but the outline is that if you can comply with our regulations and prove you can do it safely and minimize the impact to the public, we believe that we can issue you a permit. There's a lot of conditions in that, but we believed at that time that we could meet all the requirements, and that's how we decided to go forward with our plan. There has been opposition to moving on US 12 in Idaho, Montana, and that has delayed the movement of our modules, as I said at the start, and it's forced us into this contingency plan of disassembling the modules and then trying to get them to an interstate system where the height is not an issue and there's ample places to clear following traffic. Our first thought with the ones in Lewiston, where to move them up 95, that seemed to us like if we couldn't move them on US 12, that was the quickest way we could get them to the interstate system. But also, I said before, US 12 is still our preferred route to get them over into Montana and to keep on moving them. Alternate plans. So earlier on in my charts, I used this chart. And when we're talking about in the Lewiston, we have these 33 modules here, and so we can't move US 12. You would take them down US 95 to the I-84 and up that way, or you take them north. And our first thought was, let's see if we could move them on US 95, and that's when we started to talk to the transportation department about using that road to get our smaller modules up to interstate. We have also looked at alternate routes. We have moved some smaller loads up I-5 to I-90 and up that way, but those are smaller loads. And, you know, we're still looking at alternate routes. If we can't use US 12, if we can't use US 95, if ITD denies that, then we have to look at alternate routes. Yeah, we're looking at all options, but first our preferred route is US 12. Our second preferred route for the modules we have in Lewiston is US 95.
Thank you. The next commenter will be Representative Tom Trail, followed by Janet Guthrie-Granja. And let me put forward just a follow-up to this last question. This one says, why can't the Exxon use the port in Pasco, Washington, and then send these megaloads up Highway 395 to I-90? That's just complimentary to the one you just responded to.
Before you get that, Mr. Trailer. Yes, that is one route that we're looking at, using the Port of Pasco up 395 to I-90. That is one option. But we've worked with the Port of Lewiston with the modules we have there. So they're already in Lewiston, so for those modules, we'd really like to take them up US 95.
Representative Tom Trail. First of all, I want to thank Mayor Cheney and ITD, Idaho State Patrol, and Exxon for coming in and facing our route this evening. Again, I want to thank our mayor especially for pulling this together. The last question about the possible alternative route through Washington State is a very interesting one. And I think two topics I particularly want to address are safety, traffic safety, and impact on highway and bridge infrastructure. On the 5th of May, the president of the Washington State Patrol Association was interviewed in the Olympia newspaper. And his comments, I think, are very, very pertinent. He said that the Washington State Patrol, along with some of the members of the Legislative Transportation Infrastructure Committee, were opposed to increased load weights in the state of Washington. He's talking about weights of 130,000 pounds, not megaloads. And the primary factors that they were stressing in their opposition, and they're talking about Congress. There's a lot of pressure on Congress and large companies to increase the weights that we have on our interstate highway system. And again, we're talking about 130 on up, and we're talking about megaloads that are double that. And he pointed out that one highway study by the Federal Highway Commission points out that at the 130,000 pound level, that trucks only pay about 50% of the way in terms of the long-term impact and damage to bridges and highways. The more weight a truck has, it can get up to 80% damage on highway and traffic infrastructure over the long time. So these are really some interesting concerns coming out of our neighboring state that may have influenced the decision to go the other route. But again, I think safety and long-term impact on our infrastructure are very important. The last point I'd like to make is that a little secret that all of us share here. A year ago, we had a meeting where a lot of people were present. After the meeting, several of us talked to two ITD officials. The question was, does the permit charge for each load pay for ITD's administrative, technical, and legal costs? And the response came back very directly, no. I pursued that question all the way to the director of ITD and have never gotten an answer. And so all of us have a bit of the action because it's very obvious that the Idaho taxpayer is subsidizing part of this operation.
Please, could I invite Janet Guthrie-Graja to come forward, please?
Hello, my name is Janet Guthrie-Graja. I'm a resident of Viola. And so I have two questions. One is that if this route is being proposed because of the permit delays, why are those permit delays? Why are they being delayed? And if there is such opposition that they are being delayed, why should we expect to foot the bill or foot the entire process if there's other opposition in Idaho? And the second one, you stated that the vehicle time, your scout vehicle would be 10 to 15 miles ahead. I live off 4 Mile Road, and that is 8 miles from Oslo. So if there was a private emergency vehicle that would have to come onto the highway, it could be between your Megaload and the scout vehicle. So if there's no place in some of that route along that road, there wouldn't be a place to pull over. So I'm wondering how you would address that. Thank you.
Getting to answer your last question first, we have 4 rotators or floaters that we call in our traffic control plan, and these are the ones that are when the module's on the road going from one turnout to the next turnout. They're on that section of road looking for traffic coming from the side roads or from a residence, and so they would spot that vehicle fairly quickly. And that's how that would be addressed. So we just not only have the scout that's 10 to 15 miles ahead, we have 3 sets of flagging teams. The one that's immediately controlling the traffic while the module is moving. Then we have 2 other teams ahead of that getting ready at the next turnouts, the next 2 turnouts. So there's vehicles along the road in between the scout and the actual module, but the critical thing would be the floaters that we call that are on the road where the module is going to make sure someone doesn't enter the road unless he's in an emergency situation, so it doesn't interfere with the traffic. Why the delay? There is opposition to the movement of our modules. Some local opposition are concerned with their inconvenience, and then there's national opposition to what we're planning to do, and so both of those groups have got us into the courts. There's a contested case hearing. It's similar to a court hearing in Montana. We start on Monday a preliminary injunction hearing from the similar type of people wanting to stop the movement on US 12 in Montana. And we didn't anticipate that, but that's what happened, and so we're forced into revise our plans.
Okay, well, we have Lynn McCullough, and I'll offer the option to Bob Smathers, who didn't say yes or no about speaking tonight. As you're coming to the microphone, I'll read another question. What happens to traffic lights and street lights?
Again, I'm Dave Couch, District Traffic Mayor for ITD. Since these loads are planning on traveling at night, the traffic signals on US 95 are switched over to a flash mode to actually kind of reduce the delays and the restrictions on US 95 during the off-peak hours. So with the exception of the junction of Highway 8 and US 95, what we call the south couplet there to south end of town, the US 95 signals are flashing amber and the side streets are flashing red, which essentially makes a stop sign condition, if you will, for the local streets. With the south couplet, with the US 95 Highway 8 intersection, that signal actually will run in its normal operating procedure. As the load approaches, we will have our traffic signal technician in and manually operating that signal control cabinet so that we can essentially fix a green light going northbound for the load so that we don't have to delay the travel through and minimize the impacts essentially for the length of time that the highway or the load is on the highway in Moscow. So basically the signals will be in flash except 95 and 8, which will be manually controlled. ISP will have a couple officers escorting the load that can help monitor the intersections as the load approaches the intersections. And we've also recommended to ExxonMobil that they may want to go ahead and bring in 3 or 4 or 5 additional of the floaters that Ken just talked about to go to each intersection and answer the load to help warn any pedestrians that might be approaching the intersection at that time of night that we need to be wary of the oversized load. This load essentially will be similar to 2 chip trucks traveling in tandem, if you will, or convoy through town, which is a fairly common occurrence for us that have lived in Moscow for a while. So.
Okay, and Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand the traffic signals in Moscow are 17 feet. These loads are 15 feet, 10.5 inches, correct?
Yes, Mayor Cheney, that's correct. Our standards for traffic signal heads, the lights themselves that are over the road, they're installed so that they're a minimum height of 17 foot of clearance and a maximum height of 19 foot of clearance to the green light or the green lights, so that they stay in the cone vision of the motorist. So at 17 foot is a minimum clearance will be well above what these loads are.
Hi, my name is Lynn McCullough. I see your presentation here. That's in your PowerPoint, and on page 12, it's an image of Moscow and the transportation through town, and it shows C Street and North. Something for the city of Moscow where I would be concerned, aside from which near the hospital, which you did address, would be between A and C streets where there is a big S-curve where Washington rejoins 95 northbound, and it does not have, it is where Highway 95 reduces down to 2 lanes. And there is no center turn lane, there is not a 4-lane highway anywhere during those corners. And I hate to be redundant, but like the previous questioner, I live north of town and need to use Highway 95 to get to town. And what I was unaware of your floater vehicles, but what I hear you saying is that vehicles that need to get onto the highway would be stopped to let the module pass, and we would not be allowed to, say, continue to the hospital if we were in an emergency situation.
Okay. If you were in
Comments are related to this one. Let me just add this to your response then. What about breakdowns of hauling vehicles, contingency plans for a plug not moving in our downtown? You can't hear it. I know we get an echo back. We're behind the speakers. So this is about a jam downtown if you can't get traffic around it, if it's stalled in the middle of downtown.
First with emergency, personal vehicle and emergency with the floaters. These vehicles are up there, and if they saw a personal vehicle wanting to leave an exit, a driveway, and then depending on where the position of the module was and what the opportunities, you could react to it. If there was a couple other driveways between that vehicle and where the module was, you could advance that vehicle up to that driveway, and then the module would pass, and then it would go on. If it happened at the first driveway you were there, and the module was going by, I don't have the numbers, but we have a table that identifies all these additional driveway locations, and we can quickly look at the mileage between one point and another point to determine how long would it take for the module to pass before the vehicle would be able to go by.
Okay, we'll go to our next questioners then. That will be Mac Cantrell, followed by Nancy Maxiner.
Hi, I'm Mac Cantrell, 622 East B Street here in Moscow. I'd like to thank you all for coming. I agree with some of the speakers. I think we really do need to give intelligent help to businesses to thrive in Idaho. I think that's essential. I think we need a much broader economic base here in Idaho. So I think that's very important too. But at the same time, I think there are insurmountable problems with the use of these roads, which were not designed for movement of such loads, and for which Washington is realizing that, and other states are realizing that. And I find it interesting. I've got some questions, I just want to make some comments first. I find it interesting that any company can haul loads of a reasonable size on highways by doing final assembly of their machinery someplace else, and you talked about that. And of course it does cost money, and your purpose is to, part of that is to be an efficient business as a result to maximize profits. But I did a little calculations. $500,000 is a lot of money to change one of these roads. But ExxonMobil and Imperial Oil S.O.'s profits last quarter were $10.7 billion. So if we divide those two, that means that that's 1/20,000th of your profits for one quarter, which is a pretty small percentage. Then you have a lot of things to do, but it's still...
Mr. Cantrell,
yes.
is that pertinent to our discussion
yes,
tonight? Please carry on, then. Yes, it is. Yes.
That brings me to three questions. One is about the excessive delays for motorists and for other businesses. These delays are going to hurt other businesses that are already in the state. ExxonMobil is not contributing a lot to the economy of the state, even though, of course, we all use gas, we all need gas. But it's going to hurt other businesses. It's already costing us as taxpayers, according to Representative Trail, money because of the extra work you guys in Idaho Department of Transportation has to do. So I'm wondering, even in terms of delays, what would happen to a normal motorist or a normal business if they caused delays over 15 minutes on the highway? 1 time, 2 times, 5 times, 10 times. What would be the normal routine there? So that's one question. Maybe you want to answer that first. That might.
We're going, since we're timing questions, and I've lost sight of my timer. There he is, out of my blind side here. We want to get all your questions at once. It sounds like our panelists are really good at tracking those. So please carry on. We'll get that one question.
Okay, there's that question. The more important question is about long-term damage to the roadways. And Idaho Department of Transportation also has limited money to be able to examine the roadways to really know if Route 95 has a subsurface that can take these kinds of weights. There have been previous studies that have been done, I'm sure, when the highway was constructed, those studies are done. But I understand from talking to civil engineers that you have to consider all aspects of the roadway, the surface, the subsurface, the underlying geology. You have a great roadway. If you've got old river silt below that, you put a huge load in that area. You have to look at the cone of distribution of weight over that whole area. And you may have a roadway that's perfectly good at the top, but down below won't take these loads. Then there's the question of the main highway surface versus the sidings. The sidings are designed to take less of a load than the main highway. And the question is, especially looking at the one picture of the load you had, that load part of it was on the siding and part of it was on the main highway. So a load like that, when they're pulled over onto the siding, is that siding such? Do you know that on Route 95, the sidings and the subsurface and the geology underneath can take these loads? And if so, are those studies available for the public to look at?
Well, let's start out by question number 1, I believe. I'm not sure I completely understood your question, but what is the delay to businesses? Is that basically?
What are the fines or the charges for regular businesses who delay more than 15 minutes multiple times?
There actually is no fines for delay. I guess I'm still a little confused. We don't charge businesses fines for delay.
It would be the driver of the truck who would get a citation in that case.
Oh, the hauler. You're talking about the hauler itself.
Yes.
Essentially what we do, we have the delay of 50 minutes or less as a goal, and we monitor those. As Ken said, these folks here at ExxonMobil have done a significant amount of calculations and testing to confirm that they would be less than 50
Right,
minutes.
and if the same driver does that thing, say 5, 10, 15 times, what's the situation?
Well, quite frankly, you'd have to ask some of the farmers that run their combines down the road the same question, because essentially it's a similar situation. When a combine travels down the highway, he delays traffic. So, quite frankly, we don't charge them fines. In the case of these where we actually have the ability to monitor their load and to understand their traffic control plan, if we find they're delaying more than 15 minutes, then our first step is to get with them and find out what was the cause of that delay. How come it was 15 minutes?
Thanks very much. Yep.
And can we fix it so we don't, do we need to have a different...
And the other question is in terms of main road surfaces and sidings, the top, the subsurface, and the geology.
In the case of the state highway system, we build the prism of the roadway the same across from shoulder to shoulder. So, if he's driving on the center of the road versus the shoulder of the road, it's essentially the same impact. Now, with the exception of some of the turnouts, if it's a historical site turnout, for example, we may not ballast that as deep. However, since the main traffic flow does not, the normal truck does not drive on that road, the wear and tear on that doesn't occur. So if you think of your roadway as a washing machine and a laundromat, when they build that washing machine, they build it to run an estimated certain number of cycles. And every one of us goes in and runs a load in that washing machine. Over that particular time, yes, we used up a bit of the life of the washing machine, but it's designed to last 10, 12, 15 years.
Right.
Now if somebody comes in and runs that washing machine load every night, every day of the week, yeah, you might use up the washing machine half a year earlier or something.
And do you have information about the subsoils and the geology underneath the highway being able to, because the load is going to be, what happens further down is going to have a difference with the larger load.
Yeah. Our materials guys, the first thing we do when we design a highway is we get hold of our materials engineer and we say, get out there, do your subsurface exploration, find out what types of soils in there, what types of rock in there, what's their depth, that kind of thing. And then when they design the highway, they
right, but on Route 95, there are some parts of the highway that
Okay.
all right, yeah.
We're exceeding our time limit, so we want to give somebody else a chance to ask questions. But the general question was about integrity of roadways, and I think that's a recurring theme that I'm seeing on some of these cards as well. As we're waiting for Nancy Maxiner to come forward, let me just put a question forward to ExxonMobil. What are the start-stop dates? And then this person relates it to the fact that ITD says they plan to announce the US 95 Thorn Creek to Moscow by September 2011. How would that relate to stop-start dates? Nancy, please go ahead. ITD is looking at a post-EIS selection of a preferred alternate route, a preferred alternate for Highway 95 South, Thorn Creek to Moscow.
So we didn't look at US 95 South because of the length to get to I-84. Again, our preferred was to take the shorter 95 going north to Coeur d'Alene.
This is between Lewiston and Moscow. This is from the head top of the grade to Moscow. And the question is, if there's construction anticipated, what does this mean for the stop-start dates of your proposal?
Okay, no, sorry, I understand now. Obviously, with construction, we'd have to time our move with the construction going on and find a window when we could move the loads through. We've currently done this with some of the smaller loads. We've hauled an I-90 through northern Idaho and also into Montana and up to the Canadian border. There was 3 areas of construction in Montana where we had a window to move the modules through there, and we just staged the modules before that construction, and then they helped us go through the construction zone. So we have to work with IDT on that.
If I just might add, ITD is not going to delay any construction projects for the benefit of any hauler. We have our state transportation improvement plan that we work through with the 5-year plan, and we stick to that. And so we do not, would not juggle any projects for anybody.